Hello and welcome to another episode of No Tie C-Suite, and we have an interesting question that's been sent in to us today. It's about cybersecurity and how real the threat is for small, or is it for small businesses, and whether we should call them insignificant businesses, and how far do you need to go, and how much is scaremongering for people to try and get them to buy all these systems. So we thought we'd invite an expert in this area who does a lot of managed IT services and including cybersecurity. Marty Haak from Infinite Edge, thank you for joining the panel today.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
And I think we might kick it off with you first of all. Cybersecurity has become a bigger and bigger topic all the time. But, the tendency for small business has been to think this is an issue that they don't need to really worry about. We're small. Who cares about us? They'll go for the bigger companies. How far off the truth is that?
Very far off the truth, unfortunately. Look, it's the statistics are around it's around the 80%, 80 something percent. That in terms of small businesses that have been targeted, also that have actually suffered a cyber attack. So the stats are pretty high. And you're right, it's a common misconception that we get from clients as well, that from small business clients, that they're not a target. Why would anyone be interested in little old me? We hear that a lot. So, and the reality is it's far from that, because what they want is, and the most common, I wouldn't even call them hacks, because they're very, very basic. There's nothing super complicated about it, but they're actually scammers. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to get paid. So they're essentially trying to breach your email account, and they're hoping to find invoices, and they're hoping to change those invoices and send them to your unsuspecting clients to get paid. So that's the most common one we see, and it doesn't require a lot of any sort of hacking, I suppose.
Yeah, I know personally. I know of someone that's lost thousands in a transaction when they were trying to buy a property, and there was they were hacked, and they're not a particularly large business, and it's still, I think, going on for several months later, still trying to see if they can get the money, but the truth is the money's gone.
Yeah, that's right. The money's actually not. It's pretty much unlikely that you're going to get the money back. And the sad thing about it is that in the case that I was just talking about before, is that this insurance won't cover it either, because you haven't actually lost anything. You just haven't been paid, because you've been paid. The scammers have been paid instead. Your client's probably not going to want to pay again, and you're the one that was breached. So I don't blame them for not wanting to pay again, because it's essentially the response. They're probably going to blame you guys for having been breached. So yeah, it's pretty awful. Like the biggest one we've seen was 190,000 that we worked on, and that was a small business as well. Three team members. So it goes to show that yes, small businesses are a target.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know, Yuri. It's from your perspective as well. It's like you got to have the right systems in place to prevent some of this stuff, as well as also obviously setting up the security side.
Yes, you're exactly right. My question to Mari was, what are the basic systems you need to set up with a business, starting from one person and when growing and onboarding other people? So what are the essentials to put in place?
Yeah, it's a good question, Yuri, and you'll love this. So it actually, the way I look at cybersecurity is it's more, I consider it more of a business process security, because it's actually more than just the technology that needs to be secured. There's manual processes that also need to be looked at and reviewed, and the weakest part of any business is always the humans in the business. So you can secure it as much as you want, but if the team doesn't actually care about it and doesn't understand it and clicks on phishing emails and clicks on the wrong thing, it can unravel very, very quickly. So in terms of what are the basic things, multi-factor authentication is probably the easiest thing that you can turn on. So there are cases where that can be circumvented as well. So, but it's still a first line of defense. So any cloud application that you guys or that anyone has, any business has, just check to see whether multi-factor is available and then turn it on. Like it's a no-brainer, because the sad reality is that most people still use the same passwords across multiple sites, and that's how they get breached, is because some well-known site like Dropbox or Adobe, these are all sites that have actually been hacked before. Canva is another one. And then passwords leaked onto the web, and if that password's the same as your email one, bingo, that's how they get in, because that gets published in the dark web, and that's how they get access to the accounts. It's either that or a phishing email that they send directly to the person pretending to be a document or something, and then they put in the credentials, and then they've got their details. So yeah, definitely multi-factor, Yuriy, is the most important thing. And I would say cybersecurity training for the team. It's very easy to do, and regular training, so that they're actually aware of what the threats are and what to look out for.
And Pierre, I think also, I know, for bringing you into the equation is it something financially speaking, it's something that we don't tend to cater for in budgets and things, but it is an important factor that you do need to be putting money aside for this sort of stuff, don't you?
Look, I think from that point of view, it's something that's becoming more and more prevalent, and in the past we used to go, oh well, it's IT, it's a small piece, we just need to cover bits and pieces. But I think the impact of it is becoming more and more. So from that point of view, like Marty said as well, you've got to kind of cover the costs. And I think I have Marty to expand on this. You don't necessarily need to spend millions, but I think spending a few dollars wisely, or spending some money wisely, is probably a really good way. And it's, like I said, it's becoming more and more prevalent. So businesses do need to start looking at it, I think. Marty?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I agree with you. And a few years ago, we were trying to sell it as a separate thing, and we were just not getting any traction, because I could wow an audience with a story about how these actual scams take place and what the background is. And there's the one I just talked about before, about the email scams and the invoices. I was actually at a presentation, they were talking about, what's involved and who does it. And it was actually a band of Nigerian pirates, believe it or not. But, and they're doing like 12-hour shifts just reading emails, and then they swap over and the next person jumps on. And so what we've realized though in the last, just through COVID, actually, I think that's accelerated all this, people working from home. So they've realized that they have less control. So they're starting to have those conversations more about security. Even before COVID, what we started to do was we've started to integrate it into everything that we do, so that we're not selling it as a separate thing. So when we take on a client, the first thing we do, if they're not on Microsoft or Google Workspace, we move them to there, because there really isn't a good case to be on GoDaddy or something for your emails for a small business. For a number of different reasons. But then the Microsoft and Google need to be secured as well, because they aren't secure out of the box. A lot of people think that they are, but they're not. And so that's a really important part, is locking those down, because most businesses now are cloud-based. So they're usually going to use something like Google or Microsoft, or Dropbox, or some sort of cloud storage, and keeping their files. So really just getting all those things right. Yeah.
I'm interested, Marty, because we talked earlier about the amount of, I guess, not getting the traction initially, because there's been a lot of scaremongering, as we said at the beginning. And I think that's an interesting point, really, isn't it? That it's that because there's been so much of that, it's kind of had the opposite effect. And so businesses has moved away from the idea of needing to do this stuff. And yet, how do you actually get that embedded in people's minds that they actually need to do something?
It's a good question, Anthony. It's I'm a big believer that it needs to start in schools. I think that there's not enough being done for the general population to actually care about it. So yes, there is more interest and more uptake in the business, in the workplace, But then when people go home and they interact with technology there, they don't care. They don't have an antivirus on their computer, or they're running Windows 7 still, or they're running a Mac that's 10 years old, right? So for it to be really effective, everyone has to care, and it has to be in a forethought every time they're interacting with technology. Every time they're putting their data in, they need to be thinking, oh, where's this actually going? What, am I giving away too much information? Is this secure? Those are the sort of questions that people need to be asking themselves. And that's why education and awareness and training is, I guess, is the best approach to get people to actually start to understand it a bit more. Because like you said, Anthony, the head in the sand approach is quite common. It's all too hard, so I don't even know where to start, so I'm not even going to bother. Too hard basket. But it's just like, being a director of a company, ignorance is not a defense, right? And it needs to be driven from within. This is the other really crucial point. A lot of businesses have blind faith in their IT provider and think that they are across cybersecurity. The IT company or your IT guy, which is often the case for small business, they use an IT guy, is not the person who should be running your cybersecurity. It should be actually run from within the business, and they are just one part of the puzzle. But like I said to Yuriy before, it affects the entire organization, your policies, your processes, all of that.
Yeah. Mari, you previously mentioned about people using the same password again. So my next question is in general about passwords, but there are a couple of sides of it. So we all know that Google Chrome, for example, by default offers us saving password to make our lives easier, or we have some password vaults as well to use. And I find one is really, really helpful. And also, how far do you need to go with the password policies? Because, for example, if you provide access to a third party or someone else in your team with a password, if password is difficult enough or complex enough, people can't remember that, and it gets stick to the monitor on the sticky note. So overall, how expensive could be this sticky note?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I actually had to take a photo of one of our clients a few years ago where it was a medical practice, and we did all that. We put the security in place. We gave them a password manager. We made secure passwords, and I came in the week later and only to find the post-it notes on the monitors saying this is the new passwords, and I'm like, oh man. So yeah, it is, and so what we highly recommend the use of a password manager. So, and the advantage of that over using a browser like Chrome to store your passwords is that you can actually use it to generate passwords, and you can actually set policies for the organization. So there's password managers that have like a Teams version, which means you can share passwords amongst the team as well, because obviously there's different levels of access. And then you're forced to create passwords that are certain, whatever you decide. It might be 20 characters, random numerical and symbols or whatever it is. And if you try and set anything else, it will actually not let you. So that's the level that I think it needs to go. The onus needs to be taken away from the users, because the users are always going to lean towards, I'm going to use something that I can remember. But with the beauty of a password manager is that you don't need to remember it. You have to remember one password, and that's your master password. And then everything else, think about all the headspace that would free up, right? I mean, that's what I tell people, because there's a lot of us try and remember our passwords, and if you don't have to worry about that, it's just one less thing to worry about. And you've got the browser extensions for the password manager, so you can automatically fill in your password. You've got an app on the phone which now integrates, like I've got an iPhone, so it integrates with the iOS now. So whenever I go to put in a password, it asks me, do I want to use my password manager, which makes it all really, really easy. And then I just copy and paste it, and I never know what the passwords are.
Yeah, I had an interesting story that happened to me the other day. I had to create a new login for it, did the random password generator, and then it asked me to log in, and for some reason the password manager decided not to save it. And there was no reset password on it, so I had to go to another email account and create it all over again, and made sure I saved it somewhere. Which is an interesting test, right? By the way, but for a lot of people, they forget that I know in building websites that they forget to have the lost password thing in place. And that's what happened here. There was no way to retrieve the password that I had just created. So new account.
And there's a few quirks around that, because the password managers often they have something inbuilt so that you can copy and paste the password when you first create it, but then it actually doesn't remember that in the cache, so you can't recopy and paste it again. So sometimes I do that. I've done that myself, Anthony. I've fallen for that trap. I go and put it in, and the website doesn't recognize it and doesn't save it automatically. So then I go to paste it again, and it's no longer there. So I got to redo it all, reset everything. But look, what's the downside? The downside is, you have insecure passwords and easy to guess ones, and you use the same ones across everything. Yes, there's a bit of a learning curve. There's a little bit, and that's a bit frustrating for some people when they first start using a password manager. But we've had even the most reluctant client, one in particular. Now, every time we see them, they're like, I don't know how we ever managed without one, because they're just so used to it now.
Yeah.
I think one question I wanted to ask you as well about all of this is that you nowadays you get, I know certainly with Google, you get this, every now and then you get this alert and saying, hey, your various logins may have been hacked, and you get this super long list of websites, and you look at it and you go, I don't even remember the last time I logged into this website. I don't really care. And that's the question is what do you do in those cases? Do you not care, or do you actually bother to log in and change passwords for that, or cancel the account, or whatever you need to do?
It's a good question. It's not the actual, because the site itself's not the issue, because that's I think a lot of people make the mistake and say, I'm going to pick on Canva again, but because that was a well-known breach a few years ago. But they go, I don't care. There's nothing in Canva that's important, so I'm not going to bother, to do anything about it, right? But that's not the issue. The issue is that password's been leaked now on the dark web, and if it's the same or very similar to other passwords you're using, those scammers, hackers, whatever you want to call them, will actually, and a lot of the time it's a manual process. They'll actually try and log into other accounts using that password, and if you've used it again, that's why it's a danger. So really, when you do know about those breaches, yes, it's a great opportunity to then reset all your passwords, make them all unique, make them strong, but don't forget to turn on multi-factor authentication as well, because otherwise, you're still at risk. Even if you've got a strong password, it's not going to, it still can be breached, and there's still ways that you can fall for phishing attacks or whatever it is, like a phishing email, and then people can get into your account.
Marty, if I can, just to follow up on something you mentioned earlier and this relates to passwords and insurance companies and payouts and things like that. Do you have any statistics or thoughts on if a company's been breached once, how likely is it that it happens again within a certain period of time? Do the guys kind of the hackers, if I'm calling that, do they kind of try again in a little while and or what's the situation with the recurring access of it?
Yeah, it's a good question. The answer is it just depends, right? Because the scam I talked about before, where they're trying to get into your emails and send out invoices and get paid, these aren't very sophisticated people. Okay. So if they notice that they've breached one account, they're likely to try it again. Of course, because they're going, well, these guys may. And the reality is that we've actually had clients come to us that have been breached, that have suffered financial loss, and then were reluctant to do anything about it. Like they didn't take our advice that what we should do. So it happens. It's amazing that people can suffer such a financial loss, but yet still be reluctant to put the security in place.
Wow.
I just to wrap things up, I know it's a non-for-profit that I've done some work with, and what's fascinating is the donations section is regularly people try and, well, we get hundreds trying to hack it with false credit cards. And some, eventually, after hundreds of attempts, you might get the odd one that goes through. We quickly refund the money, but it's fascinating the scams that are out there and how sophisticated they are. And I think, certainly for people running websites as well, that if you've got even things like reCAPTCHA don't necessarily do a huge amount to those that are quite sophisticated in trying to get things through. So staying on top of this stuff, I think the lesson here is no matter the size of the business, you've got to try and stay on top of this stuff, and you should be allocating a budget. You should be putting systems in place, and probably you should be marketing it to people as well and telling them that you're doing that so that they feel secure in their presence with you. So I just leave it to Marty if you've got any final words of wisdom for to wrap things up for small businesses that are listening into this and thinking, what's the first step that they should really take?
Yeah. So, good idea, Anthony. I'll sum it up. I think, like I said, getting a password manager, making all your passwords unique and strong. So no same password across multiple sites. Turning on multi-factor for any cloud application that offers it. And having a look at, a lot of it is common sense. Like, have a look at what's the risk, right? So what can we put in place, even as a small business, in terms of processes or procedures? For instance, if someone sends us an email to say, hey, the account details have changed for this invoice, pick up the phone, just pick up the phone and confirm it. Don't just take their word for it and send it off to accounts for payment sort of thing. Like, it's just those small things. A small thing like that can make all the difference. So, having two signatories on accounts, sort of stuff, like that sort of stuff that the banks have been doing for years, so it's little things like that. But also from a day-to-day basis, speak to your IT guy, get an IT person. If you don't have one, don't do your own IT, because you do need someone to look after your computers, making sure that they are up to date, because software that's not up to date is also vulnerability. There's a statistics that one in four small to medium businesses use computers that are Windows 7 or earlier. So, and that's just a massive, massive risk, because Windows 7 is no longer supported and no longer updated. And 1 in 5 SMBs that use Macs have no idea what version of OS they're using, So, and Macs are vulnerable as well, by the way. So you Mac users, you should have an antivirus. Yes, there are viruses for Macs, and it's not as common as Windows in some areas, but there's still a lot of stuff that can happen. So, yeah, those are really the basics, I think, for small businesses, and like Pierre was saying, that it doesn't have to be a lot of money that you spend. You can do it in stages. It's a stage approach. You start with one thing, it's better than nothing, right? So that's the way what I always like to say, is just start with one thing and put a plan in place and say, okay, over the next 12 months, I'm going to budget for X amount and do this, this, and this. And by the end of the 12 months, you'll be in a much better cybersecurity position.
Marty, thank you so much. It's invaluable tips for everyone listening in, and it was a great question that was sent in to us today, and we appreciate you having taken some time out to join us for this episode, and we look forward to people sending in their questions for the coming episodes, and thank you, and we look forward to you joining us again next time.